Welcome back to my channel, guys, and greetings from Lisbon, Portugal. Now, this is an interesting destination for a gay travel video on my channel because, to be totally honest, to be totally blunt, Portugal has never been a dream destination of mine. It's never been like a bucket list destination. But I ran a poll on my channel months ago when I was planning this trip, and I was on the fence about adding Portugal as a stop to this trip. And the overwhelming majority of subscribers who voted in that poll wanted to see a video here in Portugal. Actually, about like half of people who voted said they wanted to see a gay travel video here. I was really surprised by that because I just assumed that a video like in Morocco, which was my last video and the last stop before being here in Portugal, I just assumed that would be more riveting content for my audience because the gay travel experience is more sort of fascinating in a place where it's taboo or even illegal to be gay, I would think. But so many of you guys wanted to see a video here that I decided to officially add Portugal, Lisbon specifically, as the last stop of my current international trip. And I want to share with you guys my findings here as a gay traveler. So let me start by setting the scene. My first impression of Lisbon as a city, and Lisbon is the capital, by the way, of Portugal. Typically, when people come to visit Portugal, it's either here or Porto. Those are like the first two stops. And then, of course, people who really like it or want to go deeper, go into smaller towns and all of that. Those are the two kind of main cities that people typically come to visit. I would describe Lisbon as a bohemian city. And what I mean by that is there's a bit of grit to Lisbon slash, what's the right word? It's not quite industrial. That's a little dramatic, but there's an urbanness to it. It's not a very lush city, for example. It's not a very green city full of trees, let's say. But it's also very colorful. So that creates this sort of artistic, cute aesthetic while still having a bit of that old school grit that you find in a historic city. And what I find so fascinating throughout all my travels is that there really is this theme of the people tend to reflect, the locals tend to reflect the aesthetic of the city. So in this particular case, this bohemian vibe that I pick up from Lisbon is very much channeled in its people. It feels like a hipster artist hub. And I definitely see this reflected on dating and hookup apps like Tinder, Bumble, Grindr, and so on. I was talking to a guy on Tinder here who's a sculptor. I was talking to another guy who's a musician. It's one of those types of cities. Speaking of the apps, I found Tinder to be a very unusual app to use here in that it's filled with bots. I'm talking like the majority of profiles are clearly bot slash fake accounts. I'm obviously only looking for men here, and yet all these sort of anonymous, mysterious profiles of women would appear that are clearly not genuine accounts. It's actually such a large proportion of the profiles to swipe through on Tinder that I eventually had to stop using Tinder. Like, it got that annoying. So I found that very bizarre that Tinder has somehow been hacked in Portugal, but the other apps worked as they normally do. Bumble ended up being a fine app to use to meet locals. Grindr, same thing. One thing that I found super ironic here is that Portugal is generally pretty gay friendly. They legalized gay marriage years before the US ever did. Portugal legalized gay marriage in 2010. And if I remember right, the US legalized gay marriage in 2015. So it's much more accepting than the last few countries I was in on this current trip. I was in Turkey and Morocco before, where it's taboo to be gay. In Morocco, it's illegal. And yet there, I got so many messages on apps like Grindr. And here in Portugal, I've gotten almost no messages on Grindr. So I find that so peculiar that it's more accepted here. And yet I feel less interest or effort from guys to chat and potentially meet. That being said, Portugal is notoriously one of these countries in the world where the local population, is decreasing, meaning more people are dying out than are being born into the local Portuguese population. And there's two other countries I can think of that famously have this phenomenon: Japan and South Korea. And between these three cultures, listen, this is just my observation. I'm no expert. I have not done extensive research into this, but I do notice a theme, which is in all these cultures, the men seem to evolve. It's like the society gets so modernized that the men are no longer traditional, like, oh, caveman, uh, lust oriented, or like, they're less sort of about the chase of women. And you see it in the women too, that the women have evolved to the point of being perhaps too domineering for men to feel comfortable pursuing. Again, this is just observation and I'm completely generalizing, but walking around Lisbon, I do find that the men in general are more sort of metro. Again, bohemian vibe, right? So more sort of like sensitive, gentle. And I find that a lot of the women I see are kind of like tougher and rougher, tatted up, piercings. And having just left Morocco and Turkey, which are way, way old school cultures in terms of the traditional sort of roles of men versus women, it's the other extreme, right? So I have this sort of freshly in my mind upon arriving here in Portugal. And I do wonder, I don't think there's a right or wrong, by the way. Like, I think every culture has pros and cons. I think every culture has toxic attributes. And I also think every culture has redeeming qualities. But I do wonder how much of this whole population decrease phenomenon thing in places like Portugal is sort of due to the disconnect, the heterosexual disconnect between men and women having evolved to a place where that old school yin and yang isn't there anymore. And then I wonder how much of that bleeds into gay culture and the gay dynamic between men or between two women. I can tell you in Morocco and in Turkey, I was being chased around on apps. And then I get to a place like here, and it kind of reminds me of my experience in the US, where that courtship and that desire to chase just doesn't seem to exist the same way. Anyway, back to the gay travel part of things. There are two gay neighborhoods here in Lisbon, and they are side by side right next to each other. I hope I'm not going to butcher these names. The first is Príncipe Real, and the second is Bairro Alto. Walking through both of these neighborhoods, I did stumble upon some gay bars. What I found interesting was that when it came to like rainbow signage and clear display that these are gay establishments, it was more subtle than what you'll see, let's say, in Spain. I feel like in Spain, it's like in your face rainbow flags from what I remember in Madrid, or in the US, same thing, right? When you're in West Hollywood in Los Angeles, or in Hell's Kitchen in New York City, or in Miami, it's very sort of obvious in your face, like, oh, you're at a gay establishment or gay friendly establishment. Here, I felt that it was more subtle. Now, that being said, when I walked through these neighborhoods, it wasn't like nighttime. So maybe at night, these places kind of come alive and it's very evidently a gay bar. But I did think that was interesting that, again, Portugal is right next to Spain. Spain is notoriously a very gay-friendly country, arguably the most gay-friendly country in all of Europe. And though Portugal also seems to me to be gay-friendly, it seems slightly more restrained, slightly more discreet, let's say. If you visited Lisbon, Portugal before, or just Portugal in general, if you're local to Portugal, I would love to hear your feedback, your take on these themes that I've discussed in this video. Am I spot on? Am I dead wrong? Let me know your thoughts, your opinions, your comments down below. And if you haven't yet, check out my last few travel videos from this current international trip that I've been doing. This is my last stop, as I said before, so I'm headed back to the States after this. If you've been watching each of these travel videos, I hope you've been entertained. I hope that you walked away learning something, or at least getting a good chuckle. And I'll catch you guys next time.